All right, so today's day two. Very exciting day yesterday. So basically, we said from the beginning, God created, the world, created Adam and Eve. Obviously, there was the fall because of the serpent. Then came Cain and Abel, and whatever happened between Cain and Abel, all the way to Noah, and the world being exceedingly evil and things not going well according to, God's commandments. Obviously, after that, the world is then flooded. Then there's a new covenant with, with Noah. Then we get to hear about Noah's three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Whereas Shem is the one who, was the father of Abram, at the time. So yesterday we kind of ended off with, with Abram. And the covenant that God had put in place with them. So today we continue, day two. So we're looking from Genesis 17 all the way to Genesis 28. So we'll do exactly the same thing as yesterday. If you've not seen yesterday's video, then go ahead and check it out. It should be on the YouTube channel or or Facebook. So great. So Genesis 17, God's covenant with with Abram, and obviously Abram's name is changed to Abraham, the sign of the covenant being circumcision, and obviously Sarai's name then also changes to to Sarah, and there's the promise of a child who would be Isaac. Obviously, Abraham at this time did not understand how he was going to be able to have a child, and he misunderstands the blessing to be Ishmael's blessing. But really, God says, no, this is about Isaac. However, I will bless Ishmael as well. Then we get to Genesis chapter 18. The Lord appears to Abraham again, but in this time it was as if it was three men that had come to visit them. What's interesting really is Abraham's hospitality, towards these guys, the choice meat and the fine flour, etc., which is interesting. Obviously, Sarah overhears, the conversation. She didn't really believe that, it was possible. Then there's a conversation that goes, on about that. Then from there, God then moves on to Sodom and Gomorrah. And before he moves on, obviously, he talks to Abraham about it, because at this time he's saying, Abraham is my friend, so I want to be able to tell him, the things that I'm about to, do. So Abraham, at that point, that's where there's this famous conversation between Abraham and God, where he's trying to negotiate on behalf of Sodom and Gomorrah, trying to take God down as far as how many righteous people he could find. But obviously, I think he went down to 10 or 5 or whatever, whereas there's only one person in Sodom and Gomorrah. So Genesis 19 continues. There's two angels. So so there was three men that visited. Maybe the two that were flanking the one in the middle were the angels. They go down to Sodom and Gomorrah, and they meet Lot over there. Lot is very hospitable to them. He invites them to his house, etc. But such was the wickedness in Sodom and Gomorrah that these guys, apparently the whole of Sodom and Gomorrah, came to Lot's house, and they demanded, to have sex with, these two angels. Well, they didn't know they were angels. They just thought they were two men. They wanted to have sex with these two men. The angels were not having any of it, so they struck these guys with blindness, and obviously then escalates the issue to say, listen, it's time to go. God is about to destroy this whole place, Sodom and Gomorrah. He's told to tell his cousins and his relatives that, listen, it's time to go. But in the Bible actually says they thought he was jesting, so they thought he was kidding, that this place is about to be destroyed, and it's time to it's time to go. So they didn't go at that point, and obviously God rains sulfur and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah, thus destroying the whole place. I think Lot survives, but his wife actually looks back. So that's where that famous story is about, looking back and turning into into a pillar of salt. So Lot's daughters, obviously, because it was just now Lot and his two daughters, they ply him with wine and alcohol or whatever, and they sleep with him so as to have more kids and kind of perpetuate the generations. And that's where we get the Moabites and the Ammonites. Now we get to Genesis chapter 20. Abraham lies about Sarah. Again, I think it's lied before to King Abimelech, but this time God intervenes in a dream. He comes to Abimelech in a dream and says, don't touch her because she's somebody else's wife. And there's a really nice conversation that happens between Abimelech and God, which I think is worth going into more detail. But you can take a look at that yourself. Now, after that, obviously, God had cursed Abimelech's household. Nobody could have babies. Everybody was barren at that time. So Abraham prays for Abimelech and his household, and their wombs are open again, so that they could have, babies again. Right, Genesis 21. Isaac is born and circumcised according to the terms of the covenant that God had agreed with, with Abraham. But Abraham also had to send Ishmael away, because now that Ishmael and Isaac were there, apparently, according to the scriptures, Sarah was a bit, maybe insecure that Ishmael might take, the blessing or the inheritance or whatever. So there to, to send them away. But whilst they're in the, in the forest or whatever, in the jungle, God provides, for Haggai and Ishmael to say, even though you've been chased away, things are still going to be okay. So later on, there's a covenant between Abraham and, Abimelech, and Abraham actually lives in the land of the Philistines for a little while. The Philistines are important as well, because when we get to places like 1 Samuel, 1 Kings, etc., there's some more information about how the story develops for the Philistines. Then we jump over to Genesis chapter 22. I hope I'm not going too fast. If I am, you can always rewind, slow it down or whatever else. But for the sake of, the length of the video, I gotta go through some of these things. And this is just a summary, by the way. You're supposed to be reading your Bible yourself. But anyway, Genesis 22, we know that Isaac is now born. Everything is great. God tests Abraham by saying, I want you to offer Ishmael to me as a sacrifice and kill him and whatever else. And, Abraham, he complies, he obeys, and he was almost about to kill Isaac. Then that's where we get the famous saying that the Lord provides, Jehovah Jireh, because he didn't have to kill him in the end. They found a ram caught in the thickets or whatever. Then he killed that instead. Interesting say that it was his only son, the son of his old age, and the son whom he loved. Which there's some similarities there when we get to the gospel, that Jesus was the only begotten son of God. So the Lord would provide. Then we jump to Genesis 23, which at that point Sarah was probably so old. She then dies at that point. Abraham buys a burial place for Sarah to make sure that she could be buried, and she was buried among a tribe or whatever called the Hittites. Now Genesis 24, also Abraham is getting much older. He wants to make sure that Isaac has got a wife, so he sends his servant back to his hometown to find a wife for Isaac. Lovely conversation that or prayer really that the servant does to God to make sure that he would get the right person, because it was a really important mission for him, and he wanted to make sure that it went well. So he basically asked for some signs, and they happened. Rebecca then comes along and does all these things that this guy had, that had prayed for. Then they go over to the house, and obviously he recounts the story of how they all met, etc. Everybody's happy. Then obviously, Rebecca is taken back to go and meet Isaac. And chapter 24 kind of ends with Rebecca meeting Isaac for the first time, and he says he was comforted, and Rebecca became, his wife. Genesis 25, only 3 more chapters to go. We hear about Abraham's children with another wife called Keturah, because I think he took that wife after the death of Sarah. Then we also get to hear about the death of Abraham. We get to see some of Ishmael's sons as well as Ishmael's death. So it kind of really fast forwards on that. Now we get some more information on Rebecca, to say that Rebecca was actually barren, and Isaac prayed for Rebecca, and obviously God then opened Rebecca's womb. But then whilst Rebecca is pregnant, apparently the kids in her, because they were twins, they were kicking and screaming and fighting within each other. So she goes and prays and asks God, why is this happening? Maybe because she'd been barren for a while. Now there's all these complications or whatever, and kind of God then tells her what was going to happen before Jacob and Esau were born. And that is a very crucial element to remember, because when we get to places like, I think it's Malachi and Romans chapter 9, how Jacob and Esau's life kind of panned out is important, for our theology. But like I said, we're not going into detail. It's just, summarizing these kind of things. So that's where Jacob and Esau enter the story, which obviously they're a huge part of what's going to happen, going forward. We also know that Esau then sells his birthright to Jacob because of some lentil stew in chapter 25. Chapter 26, Isaac, there's a famine going on wherever they were staying, and he was about to move somewhere, but God appears to him and say, I want you to stay in this place, and I will, I'll take care of you in this place. Just don't go anywhere else. And he then also reiterates the promise of Abraham. Now it's on Isaac. And Isaac then again lies that Rebecca was his sister. Maybe he was afraid to get killed, or for whatever reason. Now, in that same area that they were living, there were some quarrels about some wells. So they'll dig a well here, a quarrel, dig another well there, a quarrel, dig a well, and there'll be a quarrel. But they finally got to one well where there was no quarrel, and they kind of knew that they were supposed to, to settle there. Then obviously there's a covenant agreement between Abimelech and Isaac again, so that they would not have wars with each other, or they would live with each other in, in peace. We also hear about two wives that Esau, also got in this, in this land. Genesis 27. Then the plot thickens. Jacob, with the help of his mom Rebecca, they they take the final blessing that was due to Esau, and obviously there's a bit of a lot of drama there. Esau is not happy about it at all because of the deception, and this was the second time really that Jacob was deceiving Esau. So Jacob at this point then has to flee to Haran, where Laban, his mom's brother, actually lived, because obviously he was in fear of his life. Then the final chapter, Genesis 28, Jacob was told not to marry any Canaanite women. So obviously he's going over there to find a wife in Haran. Then he has a dream over there with the steps going up and down, and you can see angels coming up and down on there. Then God then reiterates the promise. So from Abraham, the promise went to Isaac. Then the promise also then now is coming to Jacob. Jacob wakes up obviously in awe and wonder or whatever else, and he he calls this place Bethel. Bethel, like Bethel Church, Bethel Music, great church. So Jacob then wakes up obviously and gives this vow to God that if God would continue to be with him and take care of him and whatever else, he would give a tenth of his, of whatever he would get back to God as an offering or some kind of thanks or whatever. So yeah, that's where we are now, Genesis 17 to 28. It's really getting interesting, and I hope you're following with us, reading as well, just to see how the story begins to build. So we started with Adam and Eve, then we went to Seth. After Cain and Abel, we kind of added the picture. Then from there we went to Noah. From Noah we went to Shem. From Shem we went to Abraham. From Abraham we went to Isaac. From Isaac now we're Jacob. So you can see certain characters are coming into the story while certain characters are actually moving out. And from Jacob now you'll see that's where we get the 12 tribes, then we get Judah, blah blah blah, and it's a beautiful story. So I hope you're following with us, and hopefully you're having a good time as much as I am having a good time just getting into the word and just seeing what does it say. No perspectives or debates or whatever, just say, hey, this is the story and this is what it says. So hopefully I'll see you again tomorrow, where we continue from Genesis 29 all the way to, I think, Genesis chapter 40. So that would be great. See you tomorrow.